Hello, welcome to the November tutorial video for Kawaii craft kits. The theme for the month is delicate jewelry, or was. I don't know what, because it's currently November right now, but if you're watching this in the future, I'm just arguing over semantics here, but anyway, the theme for the month is delicate jewelry, and there are a lot of different things you can make from this box because we're going to be playing with shrink plastic, but also with wire and UV resin and a UV varnish. And so I'm going to show you 4 projects that I made. And then there's also a bonus of the leaves because I didn't finish making them into anything in particular, but it's still useful because you could use them in lots of different projects or for lots of different flowers. And so if you want to skip to any of the projects in specific, there'll be timestamps in the description box. And yeah, but first I'm going to show you what was included in the box for the month. At the bottom of the box are all of the flat items, and so there are templates for both shrink plastic and wires to make wire flowers, and then there are also the shrink plastic sheets themselves. And then there's also these 5 tape squares. And so they're good tape squares for UV resin in particular. And then finally a sheet of sandpaper. And then next is a set of 12 chalk pastels. And these are really nice chalk pastels, like the quality is really nice. They're a lot better than the chalk pastels that I previously owned. And so we'll be using these to color the shrink plastic. And then there are 3 bottles of colored UV resin, and so they're all opaque in color, and there is a yellow, a pink, and a white. And then we have the UV varnish sealer, or UV varnish and sealer, I guess, and it is a brush-on item. This is a metal embellishment set, and there's lots of different shapes and styles. And then there's this 26 gauge craft wire or jewelry wire, which I found to be the best gauge for making wire flowers. These are the findings to make your pieces into jewelry. So there are 3 blank rings and then 3 blank pins that you can use glue or UV resin to attach your pieces to. And then the last item in this box is the illustrated button designed by my sister, as always, and she is jade.grove on Instagram if you'd like to see more of her work. Alright, jumping into the tutorials, we are going to start with a shrink plastic one. So we're going to be making shrink plastic collar pins that are attached by a chain. Alright, so starting off, I have a piece of shrink plastic on top of this template. I know it's kind of hard to tell, but I do have a piece of shrink plastic on top of there, and I'm just using a needle tool to mark out the design onto the shrink plastic. I like to do this as opposed to using a writing instrument like a Sharpie. Sometimes, not all the times, but I find that it's less messy and you're less likely to like smear or smudge anything. And once I cut over it with my scissors later, you won't be able to see those score lines that I've created. And by later, I mean right now, because now I'm going to cut them out using my scissors, and this frame is not in frame at all very well. Sorry about that. But yeah, I just used scissors to cut around those score lines that I created. And then I ended up making like one of the big stars, one medium, and then a whole bunch of the small stars. And then before adding the chalk pastels to the stars, I'm going to sand them down using a strip of the sandpaper I cut off. And I like to do this after I cut out the shapes, but you do have to be careful not to tear the shapes when you do this. So it might actually be more to your advantage to do it before, but I like to do it after so that I know exactly how much I need to sand, I guess. Sanding the shrink plastic will make the chalk pastels appear more vibrant, and they'll like take the color a lot easier. And so I'm going with a rainbow theme color scheme, I guess. So I'm just coloring them with a just coloring them with all the colors, I guess. And so the way I do this is like I like to add the red first and then add the purple or the violet at the end, and then add the green in the middle. That way I kind of know how much of each, like how thick to make them, and I don't run out of room on the end if I just went like one by one. So yeah, I do that to all the stars. Now they're ready to be shrunk in the oven, so I shrink mine at 300 degrees. You can shrink them between 300 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 to 2 minutes, but the best way to know how long it takes is to just observe them. And so they'll start to curl up in the oven. It depends on how big your piece is, how fast this happens, but they'll start to curl up, and then eventually they'll flatten down. And once they go all the way flat down again is when they're ready to take out of the oven. And then to seal in the chalk pastels to prevent it from rubbing off, and then also to make your piece really shiny, I'm going to use the UV sealer and varnish. And so I'm just brushing it on top of each of the stars and then curing it under a UV lamp. You can also use a UV torch or place it under direct sunlight. I find that this UV varnish, it is thinner than UV resin, and it's more like runny, and it also takes a little bit more time to cure. It doesn't cure as like instantly and as fast as normal UV resin, and so it's good for as a varnish and a sealer, but it does take a few like minutes to cure fully, whereas UV resin can take like 1 to 2 minutes depending on how much you use. But yeah, just kind of like give it a nice amount of time under the UV lamp. And then to attach the pin backs onto the stars, I used the UV varnish and sealer, and I spread it on the back of the star and then put the pin on top and then cured it under the UV lamp. And then for the medium star, I applied another layer of the UV varnish on top, and then I added 3 smaller stars on top, and then I cured it all together so that they stick together. And then I added a chain in between the two or across the 2 pins, and so I added a drop of regular UV resin because I wanted it to cure faster than the varnish. And so I added a drop to one of the stars, added the chain on top, and then cured it with my lamp, and then repeated that for the other star piece as well. Alright, so this project is done, and I'm just attaching it to one of my collar shirts. Actually, one of my only collared shirts. But yeah, so just attaching the pins to each of the collar shirts, and then the chain will dangle in between the 2 of them. Alright, moving on to the second project. We're going to be making a shrink plastic ring. It's going to be a flower ring, and I'm going to show you another method of shrinking the shrink plastic. So for this project, I'm going to trace out one of each of the sizes for that flower that's on the template, and then cutting it using my scissors, and then sanding it, and then coloring them purple with the chalk pastels. And then to shrink these, I'm going to actually use a heat gun this time, which I didn't know you could do until recently, but it's really handy if you want to be able to control the shape of the shrink plastic. So I'll show you what that means here. So I'm going to shrink each of the 3 flowers down. So I like to put it in this little plastic container box, and then I like to use a needle tool to make sure that the piece doesn't fly around everywhere, because once you put the heat gun on it, it's kind of like a blow dryer. So yes. And then right before the piece flattens completely, I take it off the heat source, and then I use my gloves and I put it on one of my fingers. I found is the best way to do this, and I kind of form it to my finger, and so it's kind of like stays raised around the edges. I don't know if I'm explaining this properly, but it gives that like raised look. And then to make them all pretty and shiny again, and to seal in the chalk pastels, I use the UV varnish and sealer on all of them. And this is where the brush on UV varnish really comes in handy, because they are raised. So it's really easy to just brush it on, as opposed to like if you had just the bottle of UV resin, you would have to get a separate brush to be able to really get into those like curves and such. So yeah. And then I'm attaching each of the 3 layers together using some regular UV resin because I'm impatient and I like how fast it cures. But anyway, so I'm kind of like angling them to where they're staggered. Is that the right word? But basically so that the petals are in between each other on the layers. So yeah, do that for twice so that I get the 3 layers. And then once they're all combined, I'm going to add one of those gold micro beads from the embellishment set into the middle using regular UV resin and curing that. And then the last step is to attach it to the ring base, and so I'm just using regular UV resin to do that as well. So here is the final project. It is a ring, and so you can adjust the size of the ring to fit your finger. And yeah, so this is my shrink plastic ring. All right, so now we're going to do, sorry if I just like yelled during the transitions. So this is the third project, and we're going to be making a wire flower. So I'm using the wire flower template, and I'm going to be tracing, I'm doing air quotes right now, but you can't see it, tracing the hibiscus design. I lost my train of thought. Yes, design out of the wire, and I just use my fingers for this, to be honest. If you are more skilled or know what you're doing with jewelry pliers, that probably would come in handy, but I just use my fingers. And then to cut the wire after I trace out a petal, I use my scissors, which I'm not sure if that's good for your scissors, but this wire is thin enough to where it's pretty easy to cut using scissors. So I bent and cut 5 petals for the hibiscus, and then one of the pistil. Hold on, I'm grabbing my phone because I'm relearning about flower anatomy right now. Okay, so this is the pistil, and it is long and tubular. Yep, so that's the pistil. And then later we will be adding the stigma, I think, which are the spots on top of the. No, wait, hold on. So I think later we'll actually be adding the stamen, which are the ends of which are the pollen-producing anther. So we're actually not going to be doing the anthers, but we will be adding the stamen. Oh my gosh, so complicated. But it's actually pretty cool to learn about flower anatomy. So then I used 1.5 of the tape squares, and I put down each of the petals and the, what did I say this ended up being? The pistil, right? Yeah, the pistil. And then the pistil, I added a drop of UV resin, if you can see that, to kind of secure the closing a bit more, which is a little hack I discovered. But yeah, now I'm going in and adding in the white UV resin. So I just add a drop. Oops. Yep, that happened. I just add a drop or a few, and then I use a toothpick or my needle tool to spread it out to the edges. And then I use a lighter to pop any of the bubbles, although for the opaque UV resin, I find there's less bubbles than, clear UV resin. And also be careful, don't use a lighter too much because the tape will kind of curl and the wire might come a bit up if you do that. But don't worry if there's a little bit of overspill of the UV resin because we'll be cutting that off later. So then after filling each of the petals and the pistil with UV resin and then curing them, and cure the opaque UV resin takes a little bit longer to cure than the clear color UV resin, so just give it like a few minutes at least. And then after they cure, I'm going to peel them off of the tape. And then I'm going to use my scissors to trim away any excess. So there's that clear UV resin I used to keep the wires securely together, and then any spilled UV resin that went over the wire a little bit. So I'm doing that to both the pistil and the petals. So now I'm going to make the stamen, or add the stamen. I'm referring to the Wikipedia page again. So I'm going to put the pistil down on a piece of tape, the piece of tape that I used. And then I'm going to coat it with that UV sealant, the brush on UV sealant on the top and then a little bit on the sides. And then I'm going to take those metal embellishments, the rod looking ones, and then add them to each of the sides of the pistil. And then I'm going to cure that using my UV lamp. Alright, now it's time for the flower assembly. So I use the same piece of tape that I used to put the UV resin inside the wire, and then I'm going to position them the way that I want to. This UV resin, because we're working in such thin layers, is actually a little bit flexible. I was a bit worried about breaking it, cracking it, but it is a little flexible, so you can kind of bend the flowers, which is cool because it gives it a nice depth and it looks more flower-like and interesting. And so I played around a lot with the flower placements of this hibiscus. I kind of was unhappy with it, and then I rearranged it a bit. But yeah, once I was done, I added a drop of UV resin to the center and spread it out a little bit so that it would coat all of the flowers, and then cured it under the UV lamp. So now I'm going to show you something cool you can do with chalk pastels. If you didn't know already, you can use a knife to shave off on the ends of the chalk pastel to shave little dust, chalk dust. And you can use this to shade things with a brush. And so a lot of artists and crafters will use this to add details to polymer clay. But I'm going to be using it on the center of my hibiscus. So I'm going to use a brush and add some red to the center of the hibiscus, kind of over where that UV resin drop was. And then to seal in the chalk pastel and also attach the pistil, yes, that's the right word. I'm coated it with some of the UV sealant and then added the pistil on top and then cured that. And then that's it, and you're all done. And that was really annoying. But yeah, so this might be my favorite piece that I made in this video just because it's pretty intricate and detailed. So that's that piece. And then the final full project is a wire and shrink plastic daffodil. To start, I'm going to make the petals first. So I'm using the wire and I'm bending them using the daffodil template, and I'm going to be making 6 petals this time, and I'm using the scissors to cut them again, and then yeah, just cut out 6 of those guys. I don't know why I just did an accent, but anyway. So after I have all 6, I'm going to put them onto one of those tape squares and arrange them all onto that, and this will also help to stick down the wire in place. And then after that, I'm going to fill them in using that yellow colored UV resin. And then I popped any bubbles with my lighter and then cured using my UV lamp. Once they're cured, I took them off the sheet of tape and then I rearranged them on the sheet of tape into the flower shape, and then I added some UV sealant in the UV sealant in the middle and then I cured that so that the flowers will be joined together. So then to make the center of the daffodil, which I'm now reading is called the cup or corona, I'm going to be using shrink plastic. So I'm going to trace around the daffodil center that's part of the template. So then I will use my scissors to cut it out. And then I'm going to use a strip of sandpaper, which I'm cutting from the larger sheet of sandpaper, and sanding the shrink plastic down. And then I'm going to color the whole thing using my yellow chalk pastel. And then I'm going to shrink it using my heat gun and my needle tool to hold it in place again, wearing gloves. And then once it's mostly shrunk all the way, I'm going to form it into the shape that I want, the cup shape that I want, using my glove. And I actually had to do this a couple times, so I ended up like reheating it so it was all like bendable again, and then kind of shaping it using my gloves until I got the shape that I wanted. And this is actually like the second or third cup that I made. So yeah, practice makes perfect. And now I'm going to make the stamen, I believe, eyes of the daffodil that'll go inside the cup. I don't know, I'm tired of learning about flower anatomy at this point and also kind of confused. But anyway, so I'm just taking 3 of those rods that I used earlier for the hibiscus and then joining 3 of them together and then doing that twice and then joining those 2 sets of 3 together. So then I'm going to make the cup all nice and shiny by spreading the UV sealant on it, by brushing the UV sealant on it on both sides. And now it's time to assemble the 3 parts that I have for the daffodil. So I'm using the UV resin again in the center, and then I'm putting the cup on top of that and then curing that in place so that it stays in place. And then the last step is to add the, what did I say those were? Stamen or eyes into the center of the cup. And so I just use regular UV resin for this. So I just put a drop in the center, and then I place the, metal embellishments and use my needle tool to make sure that they are in the position that I want before curing them. Alright, so here is the final product and project and final project for the video, and I really liked how this one turned out as well. I like the mixed media aspect, or that like combining the wire and the shrink plastic together to make the flower. And then just as a little bonus idea, I'm going to be making some leaves. So I already traced, cut, and colored this leaf using the shrink plastic and chalk pastels, and now I'm shrinking it, and then I'm going to use my gloves to kind of twist and bend the shrink plastic once I shrink it down most of the way, and kind of like give it life and form, how you see in the wild how leaves, wrap around and curl, and wow, I need to stop talking. Alright, so that's everything for this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for making it to the end. This is a longer tutorial video. And if you're interested in this box and missed out, I do have some available as one-time purchase. I'll leave all that information down below. And then if you'd like to become a subscriber to Kawaii Craft Kits, I'd love to have you as well. The next month's theme is going to be unique bezels. So yeah, when you order one-time purchases, shipping is not included. However, if you are a subscriber, shipping is free within the US. And all the information on that I will leave in the description box. But thanks again for watching. Bye!